For the past 2 years, the pandemic has been on everyone's mind nonstop. People emailed me pandemic-related travel questions near daily at the height of the pandemic. Is it safe to travel to France? People wanted to know. And now, in March 2022, the question's the same, but the reason behind it is different. The war in Ukraine is a major concern, rightly so, for travelers right now. And in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts surrounding this question people have been asking. Is it safe to come to Europe right now, given the current situation? First, if you're new here, bonjour tout le monde, I'm Diane. I've been living in France since 2012, and let me start out by saying I don't have all the answers. I'm an everyday person. My opinion is my opinion, and I think the decision to travel to Europe or not right now should be based on facts, not fear. But even with the facts, it's also not a one-size-fits-all answer for everyone. It's not. There's always nuance, and I want to be sensitive to that. Now, above all, you have to make the best choice for your personal circumstances, and I want to start out by saying, as of March 15th, 2022, the information I'm sharing in this video is up to date, but always make sure the official information you're getting is up to date. And let's begin with some facts. Okay, number one, Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, and France's position, as written on their official France diplomacy website, which was updated March 8th, is this, quote, France stands united with Ukraine in this humanitarian emergency, and I'll link to that below so you can read more about what led up to the current crisis. I feel it's really important to understand the background just so we learn how we got here. And it goes on to say, again, I quote, France has had a policy of firmness, dialogue, and solidarity with Ukraine to move toward a political settlement of the conflict and to help de-escalation since the increase in tensions with Russia on the Ukrainian border at the end of 2021, unquote. And as you'd expect, travel to Ukraine is not advised. And it's no wonder travelers have concerns over whether or not it's safe to travel to Europe right now. Next point, France is not at war with Russia. As reported by France 24 and others, they affirm that, quote, EU countries and NATO have excluded the option of a direct military intervention in Ukraine, unquote. Next, 2.5 million Ukrainians have fled the country as of March 11th, and this is according to the information provided by the United Nations. Next, Russian flights have been cut off from the US, Canadian, and much of the EU airspaces. And next up, keep in mind that Paris is about 1,500 miles from the Ukrainian capital. It's not just next door. Also, the French government has not advised people to stay home and not travel to France. As far as I'm aware, no EU country at this time has done that. Now, looking to the US State Department for travelers, what advice do they have for people who want to come to Europe? I pulled up France on the France International Travel section of this official website, and France remains at level 4, do not travel due to COVID, and that was updated December 6th, 2021. And I quote, do not travel to France due to COVID-19. Exercise increased caution in France due to terrorism and civil unrest, unquote. There's no mention of the unfolding situation in Ukraine specifically, and that status has remained unchanged since December. Now, that said, the advice noted is solid given the current crisis as well. Most notably, I quote from them, be aware of your surroundings when traveling to tourist locations and large, crowded public venues. Avoid demonstrations. Follow the instructions of local authorities, including movement restrictions related to any ongoing police action. Maybe most importantly, monitor local media for breaking events and adjust your plans based on new information you receive. I'd also add sign up for the State Department STEP program that's linked below. It's the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. So you're sent email and text alerts if the situation changes. That's just part of being an aware traveler. So do that. Now, let's turn to COVID, where there's a bit of a bright side as restrictions have been lifted recently. While France's infection numbers have come way down, COVID-19 has not completely been eradicated in France. It's still here. People are still getting sick. That said, I'm going to put up a screenshot from the WHO so you can see that downward trend of the number of new cases over time. COVID certainly is not a thing of the past yet, but it does seem to be trending in that direction. So that's a little bit of a bright spot. And as of March 14th, 2022, just this week, rules have changed and you no longer have to wear a mask in places where we've been wearing them now for over 2 years. So This is just a short summary. All the official info, again, is linked below, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. Masks are no longer needed indoors in places like supermarkets, restaurants, for kids at school. The exceptions would be on public transportation, you take the metro, the bus, and in medical establishments. You still need your mask there. Now, regarding the health pass, we no longer need to show our pass to enter places we previously needed to show it. And in terms of travel to France in general, as far as COVID is concerned, the US State Department noted this embassy health advisory alert just this week. I believe it was March 13th. Quote, France reclassified the US as a green country under the French color-coded travel rules scheme. So under the new rules to travel to France, fully vaccinated travelers just have to show proof of vaccination prior to boarding, but the vaccine pass has been suspended, mask rules have changed, as I just mentioned, and no COVID test is required for entry into France from the US if you're vaccinated. Now, moving on, I want to say I feel it's important to stay alert but not anxious. Be cautious, yes. Stay on top of the current news coming out about the war in Ukraine. We can't bury our heads in the sand if we want to travel to France right now. We need to be aware. And always check official government sites for the recommendations, such as the US State Department, embassies, France's own official information. All those travel warnings and advisories, they are important. And something else I'd also recommend is that you buy travel insurance. Even if it's not something you'd spend money on in normal times, it might be a good thing to take advantage of now, or at the very least, a refundable or changeable flight, just to be on the safe side. Now, something else to be aware of is that gas prices are extremely high right now in France. This week, I believe there's still over €2 a liter in my area. And with today's exchange rate, that's almost $9 a gallon. Now that can change. And if this continues though, since we don't really know which way it's going, there could be protests stemming from these unbelievable gas prices. And there have been protests in major cities against the war in Ukraine, and that might attract large crowds, but generally those are peaceful. So again, stay alert, stay aware, and also be aware that pickpockets take advantage of people even more in these situations. Now, on a personal note, do I personally feel unsafe in France due to COVID and the war in Ukraine right now? No. Could that change? Absolutely. Am I concerned about the war in Ukraine? Yes. And turning to French people for a minute, according to a poll conducted by BFM TV on March 1st, 88% of French people were shocked by Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Only 8% of the French people surveyed wanted French troops to intervene. Now, anyway, I think it's only natural to be keeping an eye on the unrest and the war and questioning your upcoming travel plans. It would be completely reasonable to travel to a non-Europe destination instead right now, or maybe even wait to book your trip until later in the year. And just to kind of go through it in your head, before traveling to France right now for vacation, here are some questions I'd ask myself regarding COVID and the war in Ukraine. Are you traveling next week in the coming days, or is your trip for later in this season or year? Will you be visiting countries that border Ukraine, or are you just coming to France? Are you traveling around France by rental car or public transport? Will gas prices be an issue for your personal budget if they continue to increase? Do you live with someone who's immunocompromised or elderly, or are you yourself? Also, how comfortable are you with an unfolding situation, with uncertainty and risk in general? This is a big one. If it makes you nervous, could you easily postpone your trip until next year? Or is it now or never? And would you be just as happy traveling to another area of the world instead right now? Personally, I had several people in my life who are extremely risk averse. And just knowing there's a war in Europe, just knowing that, despite being 1,500 miles away, in another area entirely, they'll steer clear of the continent. And, that's valid and that's understandable. We all have different risk tolerance. Next, you handle the stress of travel delays, cancellations, and rerouting well? Take it in stride, or will it ruin your trip? Are you able to buy travel insurance? Is that in your budget? Will losing money on a canceled trip a few months out be a hardship for you financially? And maybe most importantly, do you speak French well enough, or at least understand it enough, to heed warnings about protests and civil unrest if a situation arises? I don't know, those are things to consider. And here are my final thoughts. If you have travel planned and you decide to come to France or anywhere in Europe, make sure you're up to date on the current set of rules and the latest out of Ukraine. I can't stress that enough. Have a plan for you, your family, if that situation continues to escalate. And what it comes down to is your personal comfort level with an uncertain, changing situation. I can't tell you whether or not you should come to France on vacation right now, or in the middle of April or May or beyond. As it stands now, it's legal. It's possible to fly to France. France is not a war zone, and life is relatively normal here. If you're asking my personal opinion, again, it's just my opinion. If it were me, given everything I've spoken about, if I was in good health, if I didn't live with someone immunocompromised, I would not cancel upcoming travel plans in the next month or so. I'd continue on with my plans as the situation stands now, but only you can make that decision for yourself with the information we have available. All right, everyone, that's all I have for you today. I'm not doing fancy edits. I'm just going to get this video up since it is time sensitive. If you enjoyed it, share it with someone who has the same concerns as you. And on a personal note, war is man's worst invention. I stand with Ukraine. I want peace. Starting war is never the answer. But regarding France and travel, if you want to be even more prepared, I do have a bunch of videos on this channel, like tips for driving in France, videos on cultural differences, and that sort of thing. So if you do have a trip planned for France soon, I have an e-guide that'll also help you out, linked below, with all kinds of practical tips to better prepare you. And I'd love for you to check that out as well. And for more content on everyday French life and beyond, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. Just hit that right there. And I'll see you back here on We in France soon. Salut!